Hello and welcome to Tuesdays in the Garden with the Luckenbachs. Today we are going to talk to you about the system that we use for deciding when to do our planting in the spring. For many years now, Keith has been subscribing to the philosophy of gardening by the moon. And in fact, he's even done a workshop on that. At some point, he convinced Carol that this was really the best way to go. And she's taken it a whole step further by looking at not just the phase of the moon, but the sign in which we are planting. So the basic premise of gardening by the moon is that you plant when the moon is waxing and you do not plant when the moon is waning. And the reason for that is that a waxing moon pulls the plants out of the ground. Within that philosophy, there is also the theory that certain moon signs are better than others for encouraging growth, and the water signs are the very best. So if you look at this calendar for May in our Gardening by the Moon calendar, you will see that starting on Saturday, May 2nd, when the moon is in Virgo and then going through Libra and into Scorpio, this is a good time for planting above ground annuals, especially flowers and herbs. Now, where we live in North Madison, we are in a frost pocket. So when we plant above ground annuals in late April and early May, we are planting those we are starting them inside. So Carol has been busily starting flower seeds inside for several months now, starting with plants that need 8 to 10 weeks prior to the last frost to establish themselves, and ending this week with 2 to 3 week plants that can be planted around Memorial Day, which is when we generally do our outdoor planting. And you will see that the day on Memorial Day and the day after Memorial Day, the moon is in Cancer, which is an excellent sign for planting above ground annuals, and that is when Carol will put all of her flowers into the ground that have been started inside over the past 10 weeks or so. Now, to give you a small tour of what's been going on inside, we start with dahlias that were started from tubers that were saved from last year. So these tubers spent the winter in the basement in buckets of wood shavings to keep them moist. And about 6 weeks ago, we started these tubers inside so that they will be very healthy and ready to go outdoors. Because we have a problem with voles and moles around here, these dahlias will actually stay in pots, although they may be bigger pots than these, so that the tubers don't get eaten off by especially the voles that love to snack on dahlia tubers. So now we go into the kitchen where we have some of the plants that have been started over the past number of weeks. These are the 8 to 10 week plants for the most part. Some of them are 6 to 8 week plants, but here we have some very healthy looking snapdragons and Nicotiana and Tithonia and some more dahlias because I like to start a few new ones every year, and some impatiens that have been moved from their seed starting medium into the pots where they're going to live for the summer. And over here is our grow light. And in here, you will see the plants that I just started today, which is April 28th, a very good day for planting. So today I started zinnias and sunflowers because those only need, and also Janie marigolds, because those only need 2 to 3 weeks before they're planted outdoors. Down here, we have some things that were started earlier. We've got some petunias, blueberry lime jam and cascade pink petunias. And we have some tall zinnias, which need longer than the short zinnias to grow. And in the back there, you'll see some calendulas. So all of these things at the proper time, which will be Memorial Day and the day after, will go outside in the garden. And so I will have a very busy day on those 2 days getting everything into the ground. Now we're going outside, and eventually we're going to end up in the vegetable garden where Keith is doing his planting of hardy vegetables, broccoli, cauliflower, carrots, and some other things. He's also got spinach and peas that are already up from an earlier planting. So here you can see we have some really beautiful hellebores and grape hyacinths and some tulips. And then coming up in here is a lot of rudbeckia that will get tall and beautiful later on. Lots of pansies, because I really can't wait to have pansies in the garden. Out here is my herb garden, and things are coming up quite nicely. I've already actually cleaned this out, which is one of the benefits, I suppose, of quarantine, is that I did this much earlier than usual. We've already eaten some chives. I have lots of lemon balm. If anybody wants some, just ask me. Lots of bee balm. Again, I have plenty to give away. Some sage. I've got a beautiful rose bush here that we refer to as a Father's Day rose. It usually has pretty blossoms right around Father's Day. Got some lavender down here. And then as we go out, you'll see our vegetable garden. And for a while after Keith retired, he had doubled the size of this garden, and then last year we had what was referred to as Weedageddon when we went on a trip and were not here just at the time that the weeds got really bad, and it really pretty much destroyed our vegetable crop last year. So Keith decided to go back to the original size of his garden, which, as you can see, is already plenty big, even without the doubling in size that he did to give pumpkins and watermelon their own space. So here's Keith planting his cold weather vegetable crops. He bought some seedlings of cauliflower and broccoli, but he's also putting in seeds for carrots and other things that he can tell you. Keith, what else are you putting in today? What seeds are you putting in?
I've got a couple of lettuces to the left, and then, oh gosh, I wish I could remember, beets, a couple of different colors of lettuce, beets, a couple of different colors of carrot, and I'm just putting radishes in now. We have one grandson who loves radishes, so we gotta put them in for him.
Okay, so by the end of May, this entire garden will be filled with all different kinds of vegetables. And as I say, there was at one point Keith thought this garden was about half as big as it needed to be, but he has seen the error of his ways. So this area out here was all pumpkins and watermelon last year, but you can see that really right now we're growing crabgrass and all sorts of other noxious weeds. However, I did decide to take this one strip, which is about 50 feet by 14 feet, and I'm going to plant all sorts of different wildflowers in here, pollinators, things that attract bees, things that attract hummingbirds, things that attract birds, so that we have just a kind of wild area of flowers for our friends that we're trying to attract to the garden. So we hope you've enjoyed this tour of the Luckenbach's garden, or part of Luckenbach's garden, and learning a little bit about gardening by the moon and using the phases of the moon and the astrological signs to plan your planting. Thanks for joining us today, NMCC, and come back again next week for another Tuesdays in the Garden.